So, hello there, and welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spy Knight, and in these podcasts, I like talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing Anora. So, let's get into it, shall we? Anora is this new film written and directed by Sean Baker, who has previously directed such movies as The Florida Project and Red Rocket. However, I must admit, I haven't seen either of those films. In fact, I've seen no Sean Baker films prior to watching this film. This is my first Sean Baker film, which is a bit of a surprise because I was looking at his work, and actually a lot of his previous work is highly critically acclaimed. I just haven't seen it, being completely honest. So this is my first Sean Baker film that I have seen, and this film, Anora, stars Mikey Madison in the lead role as, you might have guessed it already, Anora, aka Annie. And I haven't really seen Mikey Madison in much. I think she was in one of the latest Scream films. It was either Scream 5, which wasn't titled Scream 5, it was just titled Scream, but it was either Scream 5 or Scream 6. I've got a feeling it was Scream 6, and she was one of the people that quote-unquote died in that film, but I can't remember. The point is, I haven't really seen her in much, so this is kind of my first exposure to her as well. And I was very, very excited about seeing this film because film pundits that I follow online, film pundits that I greatly admire, have been raving about this movie, calling it one of the best, if not the best film of the year. And I'm like, okay, now you've got my interest, because we have had some very good films this year, and if this is going to be up there, you know, I'm all in for seeing it. And as soon as these film pundits, which I, love to watch online and love to hear from online, as soon as they were calling this one of the best films of 2024, I immediately put it on my watch list, especially as it won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival in May earlier this year. And notably, over the past couple of years, the films that have won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival end up getting nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. They don't win Best Picture, but they get nominated. It happened with Triangle of Sadness in 2022. It happened with Anatomy of a Fall last year. So the chances are it's going to happen again with Anora this year, which also made me want to watch it because I like watching the Best Picture contenders, and I've got a feeling this is going to be a Best Picture contender, especially after seeing the film. And the second big reason I was interested in seeing this film is because people have been labelling it the Uncut Gems of this year. Like, Uncut Gems was a film that was directed by the Safdie brothers, and it came out in 2019, and it starred Adam Sandler, who I'm not really a fan of, but I loved him in that movie. And it was only a Netflix released film. I don't think it had a theatrical release. I might be wrong there. It might have had a limited theatrical release, but it didn't have a wide theatrical release like most Netflix films get. They just go straight to Netflix. They're streaming movies. They're designed for Netflix. Uncut Gems was one of those movies. And I remember watching that on Netflix and really not expecting much because, again, wasn't a fan of Adam Sandler until I watched him in that film. And I remember the second half of that film in particular was just such an tense and suspenseful watch. I remember gripping the edge of the sofa that I was sat on downstairs while watching the film, and I couldn't believe how much I was into the film. And I thought, after hearing, that Anora is the Uncut Gems of this year, if I'm going to have that same feeling watching Anora that I had watching Uncut Gems, sign me up, because Uncut Gems I really, really liked. I didn't love, but I really liked. And then if I had that same feeling watching Uncut Gems as I was going to have watching Anora, I was all in. So with all that, I went to go and see this film at the cinema yesterday. And the Google plot synopsis of the film goes as follows. Anora, played by Mikey Madison in this film, a sex worker from Brooklyn, gets her chance at a Cinderella story when she meets and marries the son of an oligarch, a rich businessman who has a lot of power. Once the news reaches Russia, her fairy tale is threatened as the parents set out for New York to get the marriage annulled. And that's pretty much all you need to know about this film before seeing it. And honestly, I thought this film was I liked this film, but I didn't love it. And I really wanted to love it. And there were things I loved about it, and there were things I really liked about it, and things I just thought were okay about it. But there were also things which I really didn't like about it, and things that I almost hated about it. You know, it was one of those films where in the first half of the film, I was sat there thinking, I don't get why people are raving about this. I'm finding this almost annoying to watch. Then in the second half of the film, my mind changed, and I found myself attached to the main character, Anora, aka Annie. You know, if you've watched the film, you'll know why I keep saying that. She likes being called Annie, but Anora, as I said in the Google plot synopsis for this movie, is the name that she has when she's doing her sex work. And I found myself attached to her character a lot more in the second half than I did in the first half, and I found myself really getting engaged in what was going on. I thought that the second half of the film was superior to the first half by a mile, I would say, as well. You know, let's talk about the stuff that I loved first of all, and then we'll get on to the stuff that I didn't really like. Let's talk about stuff that I loved. Mikey Madison is brilliant in this film, and she deserves the Oscar nomination, which I'm sure she'll be getting in the new year, because she has this magnetic performance that constantly draws you to her. You know, your gaze, and I think purposefully, is drawn to her straight away in this movie. If you see the film, you know why I laughed there. You're drawn to her straight away in this film. And then what's so clever about her performance is she uses that gaze, the idea of the male gaze, against the audience, or maybe not against the audience, but she uses it to her advantage as a performer, and her performance in this film is so magnetic. I'm going back to that word, but it's the truth, because I couldn't keep my eyes away from her whenever she was on screen, and not just because of certain things she was doing in the film, but also because of her performance, which is, you know, she has this presence whenever she's on screen, and she is remarkable in this film. I didn't expect much from her in this movie, but I was very pleasantly surprised. And I did find myself attached to that character, as what he said, in the second half of the film, particularly when she stands up for herself. Not going to go into any spoilers in case people haven't seen the film yet, but there are parts in the second half of the movie where she stands up for herself, and I love it in a movie whenever a character is being beaten down, you know, metaphorically, not physically, but when a character has been through a lot and is not being treated correctly, and then that character stands up for themselves. You know, it happened with The Holdovers, happened with Paul Giamatti and The Holdovers, which came out last year, although technically that actually came out in February of this year in the UK, but, you know, there you go. Technically it came out last year because it was in the awards consideration, it was in the Oscar race last year, but it happened, the point I'm making is it happened in The Holdovers last year, and there was one of my favourite scenes in that movie is towards the end where Paul Giamatti stands up for the central character. I forgot his name is now, but I love that movie. I've seen it about 3 times now, and I can't wait to watch it again this Christmas. It's just perfect. And there's a scene which I'm not going to say similar, but reminded me of that scene in The Holdovers in this film where Mikey Madison's character Anora stands up for herself, and I wanted to stand up and cheer when that happened in the cinema because I thought that scene was done excellently. And there was some excellently shot scenes in this film, scenes which have this angelic feel to them, you know, where it's almost seamless, but Sean Baker shoots these scenes in one long takes, and the scenes are over with before you've even realised it, you know. And I thought the film was masterfully directed because it felt there was a visceral realism to the film, but there's also this fantasy, this fairy tale, that's probably a better word to use there, this fairy tale feel to the film, which I also loved. And yeah, the way Sean Baker directs this film is quite remarkable. You know, I didn't really care about the characters in the first half of the film, but I was drawn to the way Sean Baker was framing and directing and placing the camera in certain scenes and how he was using sound. I thought he did a very, very, very good job directing this film. And there was a lot that I admired, a lot that I loved, things which I'm not going to get into because of a bit of a spoiler, but there was certainly things which I really, really liked to loved in this film. But the reason I didn't love it, and it pained me to say that because I really wanted to love this film, and if you do, that's great. I don't want to take that away from you whatsoever. Loads of people are loving this movie. I am in the minority when I say I don't love it, but I still like it. You know, I'm not saying it's a bad movie. Sometimes when I say don't love a movie, I get comments saying, I can't believe you didn't love it. I can't believe you hate this movie. No. I did like it, but I just didn't love it. And I'm going to be in the minority there, but I'm okay about that. And the reason I didn't love it is because of what I've already alluded to and briefly spoken about early on in this review, in that I didn't care about what's going on in the first half of the film. I didn't care about the story. I thought the characters were all unlikable in the first half, and I thought that most of the first half of the film was unengaging and a little self-indulgent. There were a lot of sex scenes in the first half of the film, and I understand why. I'm not saying I don't. You know, the film follows a sex worker. You're going to get sex scenes in this movie, for sure. But I felt there were a little too many sex scenes. Sometimes you just could have implied that these two characters went off to go and have sex. And some of the sex scenes were important. I'm not saying they weren't. But some of them were a bit like, okay, did we really need to see that, though? Could he just implied it? Or could he just say, like, the two characters went off to a room together and maybe you heard some noises? You didn't actually need to see it happen, because you do see it happen quite a few times. You do see it happen quite a lot in the movie, and a few times too many in my opinion, and that did, for lack of a better phrase here, rub me up the wrong way, because I don't mind sex scenes in films. I mean, just the other day I reviewed Rivals on this channel. Rivals is a TV show which has so much sex in it. But all the sex in Rivals, well, not all of it, but most of it furthers the plot. There's a reason why these characters are all, going off with one another. But in this film, there's a reason for it, but I just felt it was excessive and self-indulgent. Because the first half of the film, you see a lot of things happen, and I was watching it thinking, why is this important? And looking back on the movie, I don't know why it was. I don't know why a lot of the things we see the characters do and be all self-indulgent about in the first half of the film, I don't understand why that was all important. And the characters were pretty unlikable. Even the central character, even our protagonist, Anora, aka Annie, she was pretty unlikable in the first half of the film. It wasn't until the second half of the film where we actually got to see this vulnerability and this different side to her, where her character was fleshed out more, that I actually really found myself attached to that character. In the first half of the film, I was like, yeah, I don't really care about you. I haven't found a reason to care about you, really. I mean, yeah, I wanted to care about that character a lot more in the first half than I actually did. And pretty much all the supporting cast I didn't care about in the first half of the film. And I'm not saying they gave off bad performances, but the characters are unlikable, and the story wasn't that interesting. I was like, why are we following this story? And then I realised why we're following this story by the end of the film, but I wanted to find that reason much earlier on than I actually did. Plus, I did feel the film was overlong, and I felt it could have been shorter, and I felt there were some scenes which were overdrawn, scenes which went on for minutes, and there's some scenes which go on for minutes which really, really work. There's one scene in particular where, I'm not going to say much, but a group of people show up at somebody's mansion. That's all I'm going to say. If you've seen the film, you'll probably know what scene I'm talking about. I'd be surprised if you didn't. There's a scene in the film where that happens, and that scene I thought was the right length, and it goes on for about 10 minutes, but it didn't feel too long or too short. But there were certain parts of the film I was like, you could cut this down here, and I think you'd still make the same point in the scene. You don't need to have this scene going on for as long as it is. And it is a tragicomedy as well. And tragicomedies are a bit of a funny one with me. Sometimes they work really well, sometimes they can hit me in the feels and make me laugh with all their dark comedy, and sometimes they really don't work for me, and they they hit me the wrong way. And this film, I would say about 70% of the comedy, maybe 75% of the comedy worked for me in this film. Some of the comedy was really funny. Some of the dark comedy made me laugh more than I kind of realised. It was when the comedy happened in the movie, I was sat in the cinema laughing out loud before I even realised it. But then some of the comedy, I was like, yeah, you didn't need to do that. In fact, I think it would have worked better if you stopped the comedy here and just let this, I don't know, just let the emotion come through in this scene. And the tragic nature of the film did come through for me, but not in the way I wanted it to. Like, I got to the end of the movie and I didn't feel like the film hit me in a way like I wanted it to. I got to the end of the movie and I was thinking, I wish that I felt more emotionally drained by this movie, but I didn't. I got to the end, I was like, okay, that film has, it's maybe pinched at my heartstrings, but it's not pulled at my heartstrings like I wanted it to. Yeah, I think it balances its comedy and its drama very well, and I do think for what it's going for, it works. But from a subjective standpoint, I didn't gel with a lot of the comedy in this film, and the tragedy, the drama of it all, it didn't hit me as emotionally in the feels as I was hoping it would. Right, so this is just a quick little add-on, something I forgot to mention when I was initially recording the podcast, but something I meant to mention when I was editing this podcast, and that is this. I realised that I didn't compare this film to Uncut Gems, because people have been labelling this film the Uncut Gems of 2024, and I can see why. Both films are very similar in the way they are shot. They both are tragic comedies. They both have this feel to them. They both have, this high sort of visceral intensity feel to them in certain moments, particularly towards the end of Uncut Gems, when everything starts coming to a head for Adam Sandler's character in that film. And in this film, you get that as well when things start to... I'm not going into too many spoilers or too much details at all in case people haven't seen the movie yet, but when things start to happen in the movie, there's that same sort of feel. However, I prefer Uncut Gems because I think it does it better, because from my memory that was a much tighter film, and I've already spoken about, I think I've already spoken about, again because this is an ad and I'm not entirely sure I'm going to be putting this in the podcast, but I think I've already spoken about how I did feel this was an overlong film and did have some drawn out sequences, and because of that I don't think that same sort of visceral intensity and that same suspenseful feel where you're gripping the edge of your seat was felt as much for me personally when I was watching Anora as it was when I was watching Uncut Gems. And I wanted it to, particularly as going into this film, I heard people call it, the Uncut Gems of 2024, as I've already said. And for me, Uncut Gems is better because it's tighter and it gave me those feels and I didn't expect it to, whilst Anora, I was expecting those similar sort of feels from Uncut Gems and I didn't get them nearly as much as I hoped I would. But I did still get them, so there's that. So yeah, Anora I liked. Again, there were things I liked about it. I didn't think it was a bad movie. Overall, I say I had a good time watching it. The second half made me appreciate the film in a different light. But I would be lying if I said that this was one of my favourite films of the year. And maybe when I watch it again, I will feel differently. But I'm in no rush to watch it again, in all honesty. I probably will before the Academy Awards, but this one didn't work for me as much as I hoped it would. Still, I liked it. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Anora, I'm going to say it's a 7.5 out of 10. Usually I give a film a 7.5 out of 10 if I think it's solid. Nothing more, nothing less. I would say this film was a solid film. I don't quite get why some people are calling it one of the best films of the year. But again, it's all subjective. If you love this movie, that's brilliant. I don't want to take that away from you whatsoever. Too many people are like, if you don't agree with me, that's it. F off. I'm not one of those people. If you don't agree with me, that's awesome. Please let me know why you don't agree with me in the comment section below. But I'm just giving my opinion on this, and I wanted to love Anora far more than I did. Although one last thing I'll mention, which I did admire about this film, is how it gave me a different perspective on sex workers. You know, I like movies which give you a different perspective on something that you perhaps didn't think highly of, or you perhaps had a certain opinion of before you saw the film. And that happened with Anora. Before seeing this movie, I'm not going to say what my opinion of sex workers were, but I didn't really care about them. In all honesty, I didn't really care about them. But after seeing this movie, I have a different perspective on sex workers. So that's another thing this film does very well. And there are things, you know, if I did a deep dive like it, that's great. The directing is masterfully done, and it's a very well written film. There's this visceral realism to the film and this fairy tale nature of the film, which I really admired. There's so much which I really admired about this film. You get the point I'm making. But I just wish I felt more engaged in it in the first half and didn't feel like the characters are so unlikable and found it. And I wish I got more engaged in the story in the first half, because I would sat there in the first half of the film thinking, yeah, this isn't working for me. And I hate that. I hate that. But then in the second half of the film, you know, things improved. And that is where I was like, okay, yeah, this film, it's won me over. And so, that is why I'm going to say once more that Anora is a 7.5 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen Anora, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and please be respectful. If you didn't agree with me, that's fine, but just, you know, be respectful in the comment section below and let me know your thoughts on this film. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this video. And look forward to many more videos and many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As what he said, thank you as always for watching or listening to this podcast. And I suppose that's it. So I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.